Do you even understand your position here?
The main hallway of Riverside High School was packed with students rushing between classes. Lockers slammed, voices echoed off the polished floors, and the usual Monday morning chaos filled every corner. James Carter pushed his mop bucket slowly down the center of the hallway, methodically cleaning as students flowed around him like water around a rock. He was a tall black man in his early 40s, wearing a navy blue custodian uniform with Riverside Maintenance stitched on the chest. His movements were deliberate, practiced, efficient. Most students didn't even glance at him. A few said "excuse me" as they passed. Most just walked around him without acknowledgement, their eyes on their phones or their friends. James had been doing this for 3 weeks now. 3 weeks of arriving at 5 a.m., mopping floors, emptying trash cans, cleaning bathrooms, and watching, always watching, learning the rhythms of Riverside High, learning who people really were when they thought nobody important was paying attention. He wrung out his mop, the dirty water splashing into the yellow bucket. The floor gleamed where he cleaned. He took pride in the work, even though it wasn't really his work. Even though this was temporary, even though next week everything would change. Watch it. A girl nearly collided with his bucket, catching herself at the last second. She glared at him like it was his fault, then hurried away without another word. James just smiled slightly and kept mopping. "Mr. Carter." He looked up. Marcus Williams, the actual head custodian, was walking toward him with a grin. Marcus was in his 60s, a short black man with graying hair and kind eyes. He'd been at Riverside for 23 years and knew every inch of this building. "How you holding up?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice low. Only 3 people in the building knew James's real identity: Marcus, the superintendent, and the district security director. "Learning a lot," James said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "You were right about the morning rush. It's like a stampede." Marcus chuckled. "Wait till you see Friday afternoons. Kids practically run through these holes." He paused, his expression turning more serious. "You seeing what you needed to see?" James nodded slowly. Yeah, I am." And he was. In 3 weeks, he'd learned more about Riverside High than any amount of paperwork or official meetings could have taught him. He'd learned which teachers arrived early and stayed late, which ones did the bare minimum. He'd learned which students were kind to staff and which ones treated custodians like furniture. He'd learned about the informal power structures, the gossip networks, the unspoken rules. Most importantly, he'd learned who treated people with respect regardless of their job title and who didn't. "One more week," Marcus said. "Then you get to take off that uniform and show folks who you really are." "One more week," James agreed. Marcus headed off to check on the cafeteria, and James went back to mopping. He was working on a particularly stubborn scuff mark when he heard the voice. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." The voice was sharp, entitled, and very, very angry. James looked up. Catherine Mitchell was storming down the hallway toward him, her high heels clicking aggressively against the floor. She was a white woman in her mid-40s, dressed in an expensive cream-colored pantsuit with tasteful jewelry. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was red with fury. James had learned a lot about Catherine Mitchell over the past 3 weeks. She'd been at Riverside for 15 years. English teacher. 3-time Teacher of the Year. High test scores. Parents requested her specifically. On paper, she was exemplary. In reality, she was something else entirely. James had watched her snap at a student teacher for making photocopies wrong. He'd heard her complain loudly in the staff room about lowered standards. He'd seen her walk past custodians, cafeteria workers, and security guards like they were invisible. Never a good morning, never a thank you, never the slightest acknowledgement. And now she was coming straight at him, and she looked furious. "Are you serious right now?" Catherine's voice rose as she got closer. "Do you see this? Do you see this?" She gestured dramatically at her pants. There was a splash of dirty mop water on her cream-colored pants, from the knee down to her expensive shoes. James looked at the wet floor, then at Catherine, then at the clearly visible wet floor signs he'd placed every 10 feet. "I apologize," he said calmly. "The floor is wet. I have signs posted." I don't care about your signs. Catherine's voice was loud enough that students were starting to stop and stare. Look at my pants. These are designer. Do you have any idea how much these cost? James kept his voice level and professional. I'm very sorry about your pants. If you like, I can provide information for filing a cleaning reimbursement claim with the district. A reimbursement claim. Catherine laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, that's rich. You think money fixes this? You think you can just throw money at your incompetence? More students were gathering now. Phones were coming out. This was about to become a scene, and James could feel it building like a storm. I understand you're upset. Upset? Upset! Catherine stepped closer, invading his personal space. I'm beyond upset. I am furious. Do you know who I am? No, I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Catherine Mitchell. I've been teaching at this school for 15 years. 15 years of excellence. Awards, recognition, parent appreciation. And I have to deal with this. She gestured at her pants again, then at James, as if he and the water stain were equally offensive. The crowd was growing. At least 30 students now, maybe more. Some were recording openly. Others were whispering to each other, eyes wide with shock and second-hand embarrassment. James could end this right now. Could tell her who he was. Could pull out his administrative credentials and watch her face change in an instant. But he didn't, because he needed to see how far this would go. Needed to know exactly who Catherine Mitchell was when she thought she had all the power and he had none. Again, I apologize for the inconvenience. I'm happy to help in any way I can. Help! Catherine's voice dripped with contempt. You've helped enough. You've ruined my morning, ruined my outfit, ruined my mood. And for what? Because you can't even mop a floor without causing problems. A few students gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God, she's really going off." James stood perfectly still, his hands resting on the mop handle, his face calm but his mind working. He was memorizing every word, every expression, every choice Catherine was making in this moment. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said quietly, "I understand you're frustrated, but I'd appreciate it if you'd lower your voice. We can discuss this calmly. Don't you dare tell me to lower my voice." Catherine's finger jabbed toward his chest, stopping just inches away. "You don't get to tell me what to do. Do you understand your position here? Do you understand what you... The hallway went silent. Even students who'd been talking to each other stopped. Everyone was watching now. "What I am?" James repeated carefully. "Yes. What? You... Catherine enunciated each word like she was talking to a child. "You are support staff. The lowest level of employment in this building. You push 'em up. You empty trash cans. You clean up after people who actually matter here." Someone in the crowd whispered, "No, she didn't." But Catherine wasn't done. "People like me," she continued, her voice rising again. "Teachers, educators, people with degrees, people who spent years learning their craft, people who shape young minds and change futures. That's who matters at this school. Not..." She waved her hand dismissively at James, at his uniform, at everything he represented to her. "Not the help." The phrase hung in the air like poison. The help. James felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger. Exactly. Sadness. Disappointment. A deep, weary familiarity with this kind of contempt. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, his voice still calm but carrying a new weight, "I think you should consider very carefully what you're saying right now." "Consider?" Catherine laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Oh, now you're going to give me advice? The janitor is going to lecture the award-winning teacher about what to consider." She turned to address the gathered students, spreading her arms theatrically. "Let this be a lesson to all of you." Her voice rang through the hallway. "This is what happens when you don't value education, when you don't work hard, when you don't apply yourself in school. You end up like this." She pointed at James, pushing him up in the same hallways where people with real careers walk, people with purpose, people with futures. Several students looked deeply uncomfortable now. A few were shaking their heads, but Catherine was too far gone to notice. "You think this is a life you want," she continued, still addressing the students. "Working a menial job, being invisible, being someone people step around and ignore? No, you want to be someone people respect, someone people notice, someone who matters." She turned back to James. "And let me tell you something else. I'm going straight to Principal Morrison's office after this. I'm going to demand that you be reassigned, or better yet, fired, because this," she gestured at the water on her pants, "this is unacceptable, and I will not tolerate incompetence from the help. Do you understand me?" The hallway was dead silent. James looked at Catherine Mitchell for a long moment, looked at her flushed face, her righteous anger, her absolute certainty that she was in the right, that she had the power, that she mattered and he didn't. He looked at the students watching with their phones out, at their shocked faces, at the way some of them were looking at Catherine with something like horror. He looked at the teachers who'd gathered at the edges of the crowd. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked angry, at Catherine, not at him. A few looked like they wanted to intervene but didn't know how. And he made a decision. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said quietly, "I have one question for you." "What?" she snapped. "Would you have spoken to me this way if you knew who I really was?" Catherine blinked, confused by the question. "What are you talking about? I know what you are. You're the custodian, the janitor, the—" "No," James interrupted gently. "That's not who I am. That's what I've been doing. There's a difference." Catherine's face twisted with irritation. "Oh, for God's sake, is this some kind of philosophical nonsense? I don't have time for—" "My name," James said, speaking clearly so everyone could hear, "is Dr. James Carter. I have a doctorate in educational leadership from Harvard. I've been a teacher, an assistant principal, and a principal at 3 different schools over the past 18 years. Catherine's face went still. "And starting next Monday morning, I'm your new principal." The hallway erupted. Students gasped, shouted, grabbed each other's arms. Phones came up higher, everyone trying to capture the moment. The whispers turned into a roar of disbelief and shock. "No way. Is he serious? Oh my God!" She just went off on the principal. Catherine's face went through several colors in rapid succession. Red, white, red again. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. That's not." She finally managed. "Principal Morrison." "Retired 4 weeks ago," James said calmly. "The district hired me as his replacement. I started 1 month ago. And for the past 3 weeks, I've been working alongside the custodial staff as part of an undercover evaluation program the superintendent and I designed together." He set down his mop and pulled a badge from his pocket. Not a custodian ID. An official administrator credential with his photo, name, and title. Dr. James Carter, Principal, Riverside High School. Students were frantically Googling now, comparing what they found to the man standing in front of them. "It's real. Holy crap, it's him." She just told the principal he doesn't matter. Catherine was backing up slowly, her expensive shoes making small squeaking sounds on the wet floor. Her face had gone pale, her hands trembling. "I didn't. I had no idea. No one told us you were starting early." Her voice was small now, childlike, all the authority and venom completely gone. "No one knew," James confirmed. "That was the point. The superintendent and I agreed that if I really wanted to understand Riverside High, if I really wanted to know what kind of school I was taking over, I needed to see it the way the people nobody notices see it." He looked around at the gathered crowd. "I needed to see who people really are when they think the boss isn't watching, when they think there are no consequences, when they think they can treat other human beings however they want because those people are beneath them." His eyes returned to Catherine. "And Mrs. Mitchell, I have to say, you've taught me more in the past 3 weeks than any amount of paperwork or official reports ever could." "Dr. Carter, please, I didn't mean—" Catherine started. "Didn't mean what?" James's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. "Didn't mean to call me the help. Didn't mean to tell students that people who work custodial jobs don't matter. Didn't mean to threaten my employment. or didn't mean to get caught. Silence. Because here's what I've observed over 3 weeks, Mrs. Mitchell. I've mopped this hallway every single morning. 17 times. You've walked through here while I was working. Not once did you acknowledge my existence. Not a good morning. Not a nod. Not even eye contact. To you, I was invisible. Furniture. Part of the building itself. He paused, letting that sink in. I've watched you walk past Marcus Williams, the actual head custodian, at least a dozen times. Never spoke to him. I've seen you leave trash on cafeteria tables even though there's a clearly marked cleanup station 3 feet away. I've seen you let doors slam in the face of staff members carrying heavy loads. I've heard you complain in the teacher's lounge about lowered standards and the quality of people they're hiring these days. With each example, Catherine shrank smaller. But today you didn't just ignore me. Today you made a spectacle. You publicly humiliated me. You called me incompetent. You told students I don't matter. You threatened my job. You reduced me to the help. James stepped closer, but not threateningly. His voice dropped lower, forcing everyone to strain to hear. Do you know why that's so dangerous, Mrs. Mitchell? Not because you said it to me. I'm fine. I know my worth. But because you said it in front of them. He gestured at the students. You stood in front of impressionable young people and told them that some humans have value and others don't. That some jobs matter and others are beneath consideration. That respect is something you give based on titles and salaries instead of basic human dignity. You looked at a black man in a service uniform and decided you had the right to speak to him any way you wanted. The words black man landed heavy. Several students shifted uncomfortably. It was a thing everyone had noticed, but no one had said out loud. Now, James continued, I could end this right here. I could tell you to go home. Think about what you've done, and we'll discuss it Monday morning. But I think we need to address something first, while everyone's here, while it's fresh. He looked around at the crowd of students. How many of you recorded this? At least 20 hands went up, phones still pointed at them. Good. Don't delete those videos. In fact, I want you to keep them. Watch them. Think about them. Because what you just witnessed wasn't just one teacher having a bad day. What you witnessed was a result of years, maybe decades, of someone believing that some people matter more than others. He turned back to Catherine. Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to answer a question, and I want you to answer it honestly in front of all these students. If I hadn't told you who I was, if I really was just a janitor, would you have apologized for anything you said? Catherine opened her mouth, but no words came out. Take your time, James said. Think about it. Really think about it. The silence stretched out. 30 seconds. 4 to 5. A full minute of Catherine standing there, face pale, hands shaking, unable to answer, because they both knew the answer was no. That's what I thought, James said quietly. He picked up his mop again. Mrs. Mitchell, my office opens at 7 a.m. Monday morning. I expect to see you there at 7:15 sharp. We're going to have a very long conversation about professional conduct, workplace respect, implicit bias, and whether or not your values align with the culture I'm building at this school. Yes, sir, Catherine whispered. Until then, I suggest you go home. Change your clothes. And spend the next 6 days thinking very carefully about the kind of teacher you want to be. Because the kind of teacher you've been, the one I just watched, doesn't belong in any school I'm running. Catherine nodded mutely, tears starting to run down her face. You're dismissed. Catherine turned and walked, almost ran, down the hallway, her wet pants dripping, her heels clicking frantically against the floor. Students parted to let her through, their faces showing a mixture of shock, judgment, and something that looked like second-hand shame. When she was gone, James looked at the remaining crowd of students. Class is starting. You should all get where you need to be. Nobody moved. Dr. Carter. A student raised a hand tentatively. Is Mrs. Mitchell going to be fired? James considered the question. That depends on whether she's capable of real change, whether she can learn from this, whether she understands that what she did wasn't just rude, it was a betrayal of everything education should stand for. He paused. But here's what I want all of you to learn from this. What Mrs. Mitchell said about custodial work, about the help, about people who matter and people who don't, that was wrong. Completely, fundamentally wrong. And I hope you'll remember that. Another student spoke up. But, isn't it true that education is important? That we should work hard so we don't end up in jobs like... He trailed off, gesturing at the mop bucket. James smiled sadly. Jobs like this? Let me tell you something about jobs like this. Marcus Williams, the head custodian, has a master's degree in public administration. He chose this work because it lets him care for his disabled mother and still make a living wage with good benefits. Rosa Martinez in the cafeteria was a chef in Mexico City before she came here. Jerome Thompson, the security guard, is taking night classes to become a teacher. He let that sink in. Every person who works at this school has a story, has dignity, has value. And the moment you decide someone doesn't matter because of their job title or their uniform is a moment you lose sight of your own humanity. The students were silent now, really listening. So yes, work hard, get your education, build careers you're proud of, but never, and I mean never, treat someone as less than human because they are doing work you think is beneath you. Because I promise you, nothing is beneath you. It's all just work. And all work has dignity when it's done with pride and care. The bell rang. Late bell, actually. Students were officially tardy now. Get to class, James said. I'll write late passes for anyone who needs them. Just stop by the main office. The crowd dispersed slowly, students talking in hushed, excited voices. Several stopped to look at James one more time before leaving, like they were seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time. When the hallway was finally empty, James went back to mopping. Marcus appeared from around the corner, his eyes wide. I heard what happened. The whole school's talking about it already. I imagine they are, James said. You okay? James considered the question. Was he okay? He'd just been publicly humiliated, insulted, demeaned. He'd had his race and his work thrown in his face as proof of his worthlessness. But he'd also just taught an entire school a lesson they'd remember for the rest of their lives. Yeah, he said finally. Yeah, I'm okay. Marcus nodded slowly. What you gonna do about Mitchell? I don't know yet, James admitted. Part of me wants to fire her immediately. But another part of me wonders if she can learn from this. If she's capable of real change. You're more forgiving than I'd be, Marcus said. James smiled grimly. We'll see how I feel after the weekend. The weekend was a nightmare Catherine Mitchell would never forget. By Friday afternoon, less than 3 hours after the hallway incident, the video had gone viral. Multiple students had posted their recordings to TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. By Friday evening, it had been picked up by local news. By Saturday morning, it was on national education blogs. Teacher's racist tirade against Janitor, who was actually her new boss. Viral video shows teacher calling custodian to help. Turns out he's a new principal. Instant karma. Teacher gets shut down after humiliating man she thought was beneath her. Catherine sat in her darkened living room, her phone on the coffee table lighting up constantly with notifications. Text messages from colleagues. Email from parents. Facebook friend requests from reporters wanting comments. She'd made the mistake of reading the comments on the videos. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. This is disgusting. The way she talks about service workers like they're subhuman. You people. The racism isn't even subtle. She's been teaching for 15 years? How many kids has she damaged with this attitude? I hope she gets fired. Teachers like this have no business shaping young minds. The composure of that principal, though, the way he stayed calm and professional even while being humiliated, that's real leadership. Catherine had tried to draft an apology, wrote 17 versions, deleted them all. What could she possibly say? I'm sorry I revealed exactly who I am. I'm sorry I got caught. She'd called her union representative Saturday morning. Catherine, I've seen the video. Multiple angles of it. The rep's voice was professional but cold. I'll be honest with you. This is bad. Really bad. The union will provide representation at your meeting Monday. But you need to understand, this is going to be an uphill battle. I didn't know who he was. That's not a defense. The rep cut her off sharply. That's actually worse. It means you talk to everyone that way when you think you can get away with it. The words stung because they were true. Sunday evening, Catherine's principal from her first teaching job, a woman who'd mentored her, who'd written glowing recommendations, called. "Kathy, what happened?" Catherine started to explain, to justify, to make excuses. But Mrs. Warren interrupted. "I'm not asking what happened in that hallway. I watched the video. I'm asking what happened to you. The Catherine I knew 15 years ago wasn't like this. She was kind, humble, grateful for the opportunity to teach." Catherine felt tears burning. "I don't know. Somewhere along the way, I forgot. Forgot what? That I'm not better than anyone else. That the job doesn't make me special. That every person deserves respect." Catherine's voice broke. "I became the thing I used to hate. The teacher who thinks she's more important than everyone else." Mrs. Warren was quiet for a moment. "Can you fix it?" "I don't know. Maybe it's too late." "It's only too late if you decide it is." Mrs. Warren's voice softened slightly. "But Catherine, fixing it doesn't mean apologizing to Dr. Carter. It means changing who you are. Really changing. And that's going to be much harder than any disciplinary meeting." Monday morning, Catherine arrived at Riverside High at 6:30 a.m., 4 to 5 minutes before she was supposed to be there. She couldn't face being at home anymore. The school was quiet this early. Just a few custodians, including Marcus Williams, moving through the hallways. Marcus saw her and paused. Their eyes met. Catherine's instinct was to look away, to pretend she didn't see him, to hurry past like she'd done for years. Instead, she stopped. "Mr. Williams," she said quietly, I owe you an apology." Marcus set down his spray bottle, waited. "I've worked here for 15 years, and I've never once acknowledged you, never thanked you for your work, never treated you like a person who mattered. And I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You know what's sad, Mrs. Mitchell? I don't think you're even the worst one. There are teachers here who act the exact same way. You just got caught." The words hit like a slap. "You're right," Catherine whispered. "You're absolutely right. Dr. Carter's office is that way." Marcus pointed down the hall. "Good luck." He went back to cleaning, and Catherine continued to the main office, Marcus's words echoing in her head. "You just got caught." Dr. James Carter's office was bigger than Principal Morrison's had been. He'd already started making changes, new furniture, better lighting, plants by the window. It looked like an office that belonged to someone who actually cared about the space. James sat behind the desk in a crisp navy suit and tie, looking every bit the educational leader he actually was. Next to him sat Dr. Patricia Henderson, the district superintendent, and a woman Catherine didn't recognize who turned out to be from Human Resources. "Mrs. Mitchell, please sit down." James's voice was professional, formal. Catherine sat, her hands clasped in her lap to keep them from shaking. "I've spent the weekend reviewing your personnel file," James began. 15 years of service, strong test scores, free Teacher of the Year awards, excellent parent feedback, multiple letters of recommendation from former administrators. On paper, you're an exemplary educator." He paused, and the silence was heavy. "And then there's Friday." Catherine's throat was too tight to speak. "I'm not going to make you watch the video," James continued. "I assume you've seen it enough times. So let me ask you a direct question. Do you understand why what happened was a problem?" Catherine swallowed hard. "Yes." "Explain it to me." She took a shaky breath. I spoke to you with contempt. I dismissed your work as unimportant. I told students that some jobs and some people matter more than others. I threatened your employment. And I did all of it publicly, in front of students who are supposed to learn respect and dignity from teachers like me. James nodded slowly. "That's a good start. But you're missing something." Catherine looked up, confused. "Why did you speak to me that way?" James asked. "And be honest, Mrs. Mitchell. Not the answer you think I want to hear. The real answer." Catherine felt tears starting. "Because I thought I could. Because I thought you were someone who couldn't fight back, someone whose opinion didn't matter, someone who had no power over me. And if you'd known who I was, I would never have spoken to you that way. Why not? The question caught her off guard. Because you're my boss. Because you have authority. So the only reason you would have treated me with respect is because I have power over your career. Jamesy's voice was calm but relentless. Not because I'm a human being who deserves basic courtesy. Not because disrespecting people is wrong regardless of their position. Catherine's tears were falling freely now. You're right. That's exactly what it means. And that's disgusting. I'm disgusting. Dr. Henderson leaned forward. Mrs. Mitchell, I've been superintendent of this district for 8 years. I've handled dozens of personnel issues, incompetence, inappropriate relationships, even a few cases of abuse. But I've rarely seen something that disturbed me as much as that video. Catherine felt like she might be sick. Not because of what you said, though that was horrible enough, Dr. Henderson continued, but because of how comfortable you were saying it, how natural it seemed, like you'd said similar things 100 times before and never faced consequences. I have, Catherine admitted, her voice barely audible, not always out loud, but in my head, in private conversations, in the way I acted. I've been doing it for years. The HR representative spoke up for the first time. Mrs. Mitchell, district policy is clear about hostile work environment, harassment, and discriminatory behavior. What happened Friday meets the criteria for immediate termination. Catherine closed her eyes. She'd known this was coming. However, the woman continued, Dr. Carter has asked us to consider an alternative. Catherine's eyes snapped open. She looked at James in disbelief. I've been thinking about this all weekend, James said. Part of me wants to fire you. Honestly, it would be easier. Clean break. You're gone, and I can move forward with building the culture I want here. He paused. But then I thought about what I told those students on Friday. About how people can change. About giving people chances to grow. And I realized, if I don't believe that about you, how can I expect students to believe it about themselves? Catherine couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. So here's what's going to happen, James said, his voice taking on an edge of steel. You're going on a 2-week unpaid suspension, effective immediately. During that time, you will complete an intensive professional development course on workplace respect, implicit bias, and cultural humility. It's a 40-hour course. You will do it on your own time, at your own expense. Catherine nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. When you return, you will be on probationary status for the remainder of the school year. 1 complaint, ONE, about disrespectful treatment of staff, students, or colleagues, and your employment is terminated immediately. No warnings. No second chances. Are we clear? Crystal clear. You'll also be writing formal, written apologies to every custodial staff member, every cafeteria worker, and every security guard in this building. Not generic apologies. Specific ones that show you understand what you did wrong. I will. I'll start today. And one more thing. James leaned forward. Every Wednesday afternoon for the rest of the semester, you'll be spending 2 hours shadowing our support staff. Custodial, cafeteria, security, rotating through each department. You're going to learn what they do, how hard they work, and what it actually takes to keep this school running. Catherine's eyes widened. You want me to work with them? I want you to see them, James corrected sharply. Really see them. As human beings with skills and dignity and stories. Not as people beneath you. Not as the help. As colleagues who are just as essential to this school as you are. Dr. Henderson spoke up. Mrs. Mitchell, I want to be clear about something. This is extraordinary leniency given the severity of your conduct. Dr. Carter specifically advocated for this approach when the HR team recommended immediate termination. But if you squander this opportunity, if you come back and nothing has changed, you won't just lose your job here. I'll personally ensure that every school district in the state knows exactly why you were fired. The threat was delivered calmly, but it was unmistakable. I understand, Catherine whispered. And Dr. Carter, thank you. I don't deserve this chance, but I promise you, I won't waste it. James studied her for a long moment. We'll see. Talk is easy, Mrs. Mitchell. Change is hard. The question is whether you're capable of it. After Catherine left, Dr. Henderson turned to James. That was generous of you. Maybe too generous. James sighed. Maybe, but I keep thinking about those students watching on Friday. If I fire her immediately, what's the lesson? That mistakes are unforgivable? That there's no path to redemption? The lesson could also be that actions have consequences, Dr. Henderson pointed out. They do have consequences, James said. She's been suspended without pay. She's on probation. She's been publicly humiliated in front of the entire school and half the internet. Those are significant consequences. He paused. But I also want to leave room for the possibility that people can be better than their worst moment. Because if we don't believe that, if we give up on people the second they fail, then what are we even doing in education? Dr. Henderson nodded slowly. You're a better person than I am, James. Or maybe I'm naive, James admitted. Guess we'll find out. 3 months later, James Carter stood at the front of the Riverside High Auditorium during the monthly all-staff meeting. Every teacher, every administrator, and every support staff member was present. Before we get to budget discussions and upcoming events, James said, I want to recognize someone. Marcus Williams, could you come up here, please? Marcus looked surprised but walked up to the front. Students had started a slow clap that quickly spread through the auditorium. Last week, James continued, the National Education Association announced their annual Support Staff Recognition Awards. And I'm proud to announce that Marcus Williams has been named Regional Custodian of the Year. The auditorium erupted in applause. Marcus's face broke into a huge grin as James presented him with a plaque. Marcus has been at Riverside for 23 years. James said once the applause died down. 23 years of arriving before dawn and leaving after dark. 23 years of keeping this school clean, safe, and functional. 23 years of knowing every student's name, every teacher's preferences, every quirk of this old building. Marcus wiped his eyes, clearly emotional. This award recognizes what we should have been recognizing all along, James continued. That the work Marcus does isn't just important, it's essential. That this school doesn't function without people like him. That custodial work isn't something to look down on, it's something to respect and appreciate. More applause. James caught sight of Catherine Mitchell in the third row, clapping along with everyone else. She looked different than she had 3 months ago. Smaller, somehow, humbler. After the meeting, James returned to his office to find Catherine waiting outside. Dr. Carter, do you have a moment? Come in. Catherine entered and closed the door behind her. She looked nervous. I wanted to give you something, she said, pulling out a folder. My probationary period ends next week, and I've been documenting my progress. The workshops I completed, the apology letters I wrote, feedback from the staff I've been shadowing. James took the folder but didn't open it yet. How's it been? The shadowing. Catherine sat down, choosing her words carefully. Humbling. Eye-opening. Harder than I expected. How so? I spent last Wednesday with Rosa in the cafeteria, Catherine said. We served lunch to 800 students in 90 minutes. Do you know how much planning goes into that? How much coordination? How hard it is physically? I was exhausted after 2 hours. Rosa does it every single day, with a smile on her face, remembering which kids have allergies and which ones need a little extra because they might not get dinner at home. She paused. I spent another afternoon with Marcus cleaning classrooms, including my own. Do you know what I found? Gum stuck under desks, trash stuff in corners, spills that had been left for someone else to deal with, all in MY classroom, from MY students. And I'd never once thought about who was cleaning it up or how much extra work it made for them. James listened without interrupting. And last week I shadowed Jerome in security. Catherine continued, her voice getting thick. A kid had a complete breakdown, family issues, mental health crisis, the whole thing. Jerome sat with that boy for 4 to 5 minutes, talked him down, called his counselor, made sure he was safe. And I realized Jerome sees more of what's really happening with our students than most teachers do. He knows who's struggling, who's dealing with stuff at home, who needs help. She looked directly at James. I've been teaching here for 15 years, and I didn't know any of that, because I never bothered to look, never bothered to see these people as anything more than the help. James finished quietly. Now I see them, Catherine said simply, and I can never go back to not seeing them. It's like, once you really understand that every person has a whole life, a whole story, whole dreams and struggles and dignity, you can't unknow it. You can't unsee it. James opened the folder and glanced through it. Pages of reflection, letters of apology, real ones, specific and heartfelt, feedback forms from Marcus, Rosa, Jerome, and others, all positive, all noting genuine change and effort. The students talk about you differently now, James said. Did you know that? Catherine looked up in surprise. What do they say? That you're nicer, more patient, that you actually listen now instead of just waiting for your turn to talk, that you treat everyone the same whether they're the star student or struggling. He closed the folder. Several parents have specifically requested you for next year, including some who were demanding you be fired after that video went viral. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? James leaned back in his chair. So here's my question, Catherine. Why did it take public humiliation to make you change? Why couldn't you have been this person all along? The question hung heavy in the air. Because I didn't have to be, Catherine admitted. Because the old way worked for me. I got awards, recognition, parent requests. Why would I change something that was working? Except it wasn't working, James pointed out. You were hurting people. You just didn't care because they couldn't hurt you back. You're right. Catherine wiped her eyes. And I hate that about myself. I hate that I needed to be humiliated to learn basic human decency. I hate that I have 15 years of damage I can never undo. I hate that there are students and staff who remember me as the person I was, not the person I'm trying to become. She looked at James directly. But I'm grateful too. Grateful you gave me this chance. Grateful I finally understand what matters. Grateful I might have time to do better going forward, even if I can't fix the past. James was quiet for a moment, studying her. Your probation ends next Friday, he said finally. Assuming no incidents this week, you'll return to regular employment status. But Catherine, and I need you to really hear this, I'm going to be watching. Not because I don't trust you, but because real change is something you have to prove every single day. It's not a switch you flip. It's a choice you make over and over again. I know, Catherine said, and I'm making that choice. Every single day. Good. James stood, signaling the meeting was ending. Oh, and Catherine, Marcus mentioned you've been staying late on Wednesdays to help him with the library. That wasn't required. Catherine smiled slightly. I know, but I wanted to. Turns out, spending time with people when you actually see them as people is nice. I'm learning things. About the school. About the students. About myself. Keep doing that, James said. Keep learning. Keep growing. Keep seeing. As Catherine left, James sat back down and pulled out his phone. He opened his notes app where he'd been keeping a journal of his first few months as principal. Month 3, he typed. Catherine Mitchell update. Genuine change. I think. Time will tell if it lasts. But for now, I'm cautiously optimistic. Maybe people can change after all. Maybe that's the whole point of education. Not just teaching subjects, but teaching people how to be better humans. The staff culture is shifting. Small changes, but noticeable. More teachers stopping to thank custodians. Better cleanup in the cafeteria. Security guard being included in staff events. It's not perfect, but it's better. That video from my first week has been viewed over 5 million times now. The comments section has become an ongoing debate about respect, dignity, and how we value different types of work. Students from other schools have reached out asking how they can change their own school cultures. I never wanted to go viral. Never wanted that kind of attention. But maybe something good came from it anyway. Maybe thousands of people saw that video and thought twice about how they treat service workers. Maybe some kids saw it and decided to be different than the adults around them. Or maybe I'm being optimistic. Time will tell. He closed the app and looked out his office window at the Riverside High campus. Students moving between classes, teachers chatting in the hallways, custodians working quietly in the background, and everyone, or at least more people than before, actually seeing each other, not as titles or jobs or positions on a hierarchy, but as people. 6 months later, the end-of-year staff appreciation event was packed. Teachers, administrators, and support staff all gathered in the decorated cafeteria for dinner and awards. James stood at the podium for closing remarks. "This has been quite a year," he said, and the room chuckled. "My unconventional introduction to Riverside High has become something of a legend, I understand. Students are still showing that video to their friends. It's become part of the school's law." More laughter. "But here's what I want you to remember about that moment. Not the drama, not the viral video, but the lesson underneath it all." The room grew quiet. "We know," Rosa said gently, "and we see you trying. That matters." "Does it, though?" Catherine asked. "Every single person in this building matters. From me, sitting in the principal's office, to Marcus, arriving at 5 a.m. to make sure classrooms are clean before students arrive. From our department heads to our part-time lunch monitors. From our veteran teachers to our brand-new student teachers. Everyone." He paused. "Because here's the truth. Riverside High doesn't function because of any one person. It functions because of all of us working together, respecting each other, seeing each other as full human beings with dignity and value." James looked out at the gathered staff. "This year, I've watched our culture shift. I've seen teachers staying late to help custodians move heavy equipment. I've seen custodians joining staff book clubs. I've seen cafeteria workers invited to department meetings because they have insights about students that teachers miss. I've seen security guards recognized for their contributions to student well-being. I've seen people, maybe for the first time, really seeing each other." He smiled. "That's what I wanted to build here. Not a school where some people matter more than others, but a school where everyone matters, where everyone's work is valued, where everyone's dignity is protected." James raised his glass. "So here's to all of us, every single one of us. Thank you for making Riverside High a place where everyone belongs." The room erupted in applause. Catherine Mitchell sat at a table with Rosa, Marcus, and Jerome. A year ago, she would never have sat with support staff, would have sought out the important people, department heads, veteran teachers, administrators. Now, she couldn't imagine sitting anywhere else. Rosa leaned over. "That was a good speech." "It was," Catherine agreed, "and he meant every word. I've never worked for a principal who actually lived their values like this." Marcus smiled. "That's because he knows what it's like to be invisible. He spent 3 weeks being treated like he didn't matter. That changes a person, makes them determined to make sure nobody else feels that way." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "I made him feel that way. For 3 weeks, I walked past him like he was furniture. And that was just 3 weeks. How many years did I do that to you, Marcus? To you, Rosa? To Jerome?" 15 years, Marcus said bluntly. Catherine flinched but nodded. 15 years. I'm sorry. I know I've said it before, but I'll keep saying it. I'm sorry. Does 3 months to try and make up for 15 years of what I was? Jerome spoke up for the first time. No, it doesn't make up for it. You can't erase the past, Catherine, but you can choose a future. And you're choosing to be different. That's something. Catherine felt tears burning again. I just wish I'd figured this out sooner. Before the video. Before the humiliation. Before you were forced to change. Marcus interrupted. Yeah, we all wish that. But here's the thing. Most people never change at all. They go their whole lives treating people badly and never once questioning it. You got caught. You got consequences. And you chose to actually learn from it instead of just being bitter and resentful. He raised his glass. So yeah, it took a viral video and public shaming to get you here. Not ideal, but you're here now, and that's better than not being here at all. They clinked glasses. Around them, the party continued. Teachers laughing with custodians. Administrators chatting with cafeteria workers. A school community that was slowly, imperfectly, learning to see each other as humans first and job title second. It wasn't perfect. There were still teachers who looked down on support staff. Still students who threw trash on clean floors. Still moments of unconscious bias and casual disrespect. But it was better. And better was enough to build on. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, James Carter walked through the empty hallways of Riverside High one more time. He still did this sometimes, walked the building like he had during those 3 weeks as a custodian, checking doors, noticing details, remembering. He paused in the main hallway where it had all happened, where Catherine Mitchell had called him to help, where he'd revealed his identity, where everything had changed. The floor was clean now, gleaming. Someone, probably Marcus, had buffed it until it shined. James thought about that morning 6 months ago, about the anger and humiliation he'd felt, about the decision to reveal himself publicly instead of quietly dealing with it in his office later. Had it been the right call? Hard to say. The video had caused problems, reporters, attention, district scrutiny. But it had also started conversations, changed perspectives, made people think twice about how they treated service workers. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Buildings locked up. Security set. Have a good night, boss. James smiled and typed back, "Thanks, Marcus. See you Monday." He took one last look at the empty hallway, turned off the lights, and headed home. Behind him, Riverside High School settled into silence. The floors were clean. The lights were off. The building was ready for another day of education, growth, and learning, not just for students, but for everyone. Moral lesson. Respect is not determined by job titles, salaries, or positions of authority. Every human being deserves dignity and courtesy simply because they are human. How you treat people when you think it doesn't matter reveals who you truly are, because it always matters. The janitor might be the principal, but even if he isn't, he still deserves respect. That's the point.